It was late evening in the remote countryside of the Appalachian Mountains, West Virginia. The sky was bruised and darkening, the road winding endlessly through the thick forest that seemed to close in on all sides. Jessica Reed, a 28-year-old photographer, was on a mission to rediscover herself. She was freshly broken up, her heart still tender from the blow. The road trip was supposed to help her find herself again, a journey of healing and exploration. It was just her camera, and miles of rugged landscapes. She was adventurous, but not reckless. And tonight, she felt the weight of that loneliness pressing in. The hills seemed endless, the trees like silent watchers. She glanced at her phone, sending a quick message to Megan, her best friend, letting her know she was still okay and still on the road. Megan had insisted she keep in constant contact, worried about Jessica's safety on this solo trip. After all, the countryside was as beautiful as it was isolated, and her parents' disapproval of her freelance lifestyle weighed heavy in the back of her mind. The broken promises, the disappointed tones, the countless arguments over security and stability all seemed to echo around her as the sun sank below the horizon. The GPS on her phone started glitching, the blue line suddenly jerking off course and fading into nothingness. She frowned and tapped the screen, but the device had lost its signal completely. The road had begun to narrow, the trees on either side thickening until their branches almost met above her, skeletal fingers scratching against the top of her car. She swallowed hard, a prickle of unease crawling up her spine. She must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. Maybe if she just kept driving, she could find a place to turn around and get back to the highway. The crackling sound of static burst from her radio, interrupting her thoughts. Jessica glanced at the console, startled. She hadn't turned it on. The static grew louder, mixed with faint whispers. Goosebumps erupted on her arms, and she reached over, twisting the knob until silence returned. She exhaled, trying to shake off the chill that had settled into her bones. A few miles later, the dirt road opened into a clearing, revealing a small village. Jessica slowed the car, her headlights illuminating the scene. It looked like it had been plucked from another time. Dilapidated houses lined the single street, their windows boarded up or shattered. The roofs sagged, and the paint had peeled away long ago. An old-fashioned street lamp flickered on the corner, casting long, eerie shadows. Jessica's heart pounded. The village wasn't on any map she'd seen, and it certainly wasn't marked on her GPS. Curtains in one of the houses fluttered, as if someone had quickly moved away from the window. Jessica swallowed, curiosity and fear battling within her. She couldn't just drive away. She was a photographer, after all. This was exactly the kind of place that could make for some truly unique shots, something raw and real that her portfolio desperately needed. Besides, she told herself, she had to believe there was a logical explanation for this place. She parked her car near the flickering street lamp and stepped out, her camera hanging from her neck. The air was cold, far colder than it had any right to be in early November. The fog rolled in, curling around her ankles, muffling the crunch of her boots on the gravel. Jessica began to take photos, the click of her camera the only sound in the eerie silence. She caught glimpses of faces in the periphery, children peeking from behind corners, their faces expressionless, eyes unnaturally wide. She turned her head quickly, but they vanished, leaving her staring at empty space. She shivered, but continued to walk down the street, her camera clicking, capturing the decaying structures and the strange, haunting atmosphere. Suddenly, an old man appeared at the end of the street. He stood still, staring at her, his eyes clouded and his skin pale. He raised one hand and gestured for her to leave, but he didn't say a word. The gesture was slow, deliberate, almost robotic. Jessica's stomach twisted and an instinctive fear rippled through her. I'm sorry, I'll leave, she stammered, stepping back toward her car. The old man didn't move, his arms still outstretched, pointing back the way she had come. Jessica turned on her heel, her heart pounding, and hurried back to her car. She fumbled with the door handle before finally wrenching it open and climbing inside. She glanced in the rearview mirror, but the old man was gone. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She just needed to get out of here, find her way back to the main road. Jessica started the car, the engine rumbling to life, and turned the wheel. But as she looked ahead, her heart sank. The road she had driven in on was gone, replaced by dense forest. The trees loomed, their branches twisted together, forming an impenetrable barrier. Panic set in, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She was trapped. Jessica's breath came in short gasps as she looked around, her eyes darting from one darkened building to another. The village seemed different now, more decrepit, as if years had passed in the few minutes she'd been there. One of the buildings crumbled before her eyes, the wooden structure collapsing into dust. The sky above darkened unnaturally fast, the stars blinking out until there was nothing but blackness. Shadows stretched toward her, moving of their own accord, slithering across the ground like living things. The villagers began to emerge. Jessica's headlights caught them at the edges of the clearing, their movements jerky, unnatural, like puppets on tangled strings. The old man was among them, his eyes locked on hers, empty and cold. Jessica's heart hammered in her chest as she threw the car into reverse, but there was nowhere to go. She had to find a place to hide. Her eyes landed on a church at the end of the street. It was old, the steeple broken, but it was her only chance. Jessica flung open the car door and ran, her camera bouncing against her chest. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing around her, calling her name. She stumbled, her foot catching on a loose stone, but she pushed herself up, her legs burning as she sprinted toward the church. The door creaked as she shoved it open, slipping inside and slamming it shut behind her. She pressed her back against the door, her chest heaving. The whispers were still there, muffled by the thick wooden door, but she could hear them, calling, taunting, promising things she didn't dare to understand. Jessica looked around, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The church was empty, the pews covered in dust, the air thick and cold. Her gaze fell on a table at the front of the church, and her blood ran cold. Photographs were spread across its surface, yellowed with age. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as she picked one up. It showed a group of travelers, their eyes wide with fear. Another photograph showed a young couple, their faces twisted in horror. Jessica's breath caught in her throat as she picked up the last photograph. It was of her, taken just moments ago, as she entered the village. She dropped the photograph, her hands flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. The village was a trap, a place for lost souls, for those who took a wrong turn and never made it out. Jessica backed away, her eyes wide, her mind racing. She had to get out. She had to escape, her backpack. She remembered the lighter and the small can of emergency fuel she always carried. Her fingers fumbled as she pulled them out, her heart pounding in her ears. If the village wanted to trap her, she would burn it to the ground. She flicked the lighter, the small flame dancing in the darkness, and poured the fuel over the wooden pews. The fire caught quickly, the flames spreading, licking up the walls, consuming the dry wood. The whispers turned to screams. Jessica stumbled back, her eyes wide as the villagers appeared in the doorway, their forms twisting, shadows writhing, tethered to the darkness. The fire revealed their true nature, twisted, hollow, nothing but shadows given form. Jessica turned and ran, the heat of the flames at her back, the screams of the entities echoing through the church. She burst through the back door, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. The forest road was there, clear and open, the trees no longer blocking her way. Jessica didn't hesitate. She ran to her car, her lungs burning, her vision blurred with tears. She threw herself inside, started the engine, and tore down the road, her hands shaking on the wheel. The screams faded as the village disappeared in her rearview mirror, the flames consuming everything. Jessica didn't stop until she reached the main road, the bright yellow lines a sight that nearly brought her to tears. Her phone buzzed, the signal returning, messages from Megan flooding in. Jessica grabbed the phone, her hands still trembling, and dialed Megan's number. "Jess, oh my God, where have you been? I've been so worried." Megan's voice was frantic, filled with relief. "I'm okay," Jessica managed, her voice breaking. I don't even know where to start. I'm never going off the main road again. Ever." Megan was silent for a moment, and then she sighed. "Just get somewhere safe, okay? We can talk later." Jessica nodded, even though Megan couldn't see her. "I will. I promise." She hung up, her hands still shaking as she placed the phone down. Her camera lay on the passenger seat and she picked it up, her thumb scrolling through the photos. The village, the old man, the children. It was all there. proof of what had happened. Proof that it was real. She shivered, setting the camera down and focusing on the road ahead. The night was dark, but the headlights cut through the blackness, and she knew she would keep moving forward. She had survived. She had faced the darkness and come out the other side. But as she drove, she couldn't shake the feeling that something still watched her, that the village, or whatever it was, still had a hold on her. Her phone screen flickered, a single image appearing, a photograph of the village, taken from the edge of the forest, a lone figure standing beneath the flickering street lamp. Jessica's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widening. The figure was there, watching, waiting. She threw the phone onto the passenger seat, her hands gripping the wheel until her knuckles turned white. She would keep moving, keep driving. She had escaped, but she knew, deep down, that some roads once taken never truly let you go.